Oh, there we go. Okay. Hello, guys. This is a little conversation I'm doing with Jinx. Hello, Jinx.
Nice to meet you, by the
Yeah,
way.
it is.
We only had like a brief interaction on Twitter
Yeah,
before this.
I just discovered you. I found your ContraPoints video, and I'm like, I kind of want to talk to this guy.
Yeah, like I just recently found like I've heard of ContraPoints,
Hmm.
and I've heard her name tossed around. I think Sargon even did a video with her before.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but I've never really looked at her videos until recently, and I was like, she's really interesting. I mean, she's supposedly a social justice warrior. I do see why they say that. But
Right.
she does have some opinions that I actually would agree with.
Like what?
Well, she doesn't really go over it, but I'm against crony capitalism, even though like right now with the vape mods, they're using lobbyists to try and keep them legal for people to use across the board. Um, and I mean, I guess that's what it's going to have to take. But generally, I'm against crony capitalism, and I think she's against crony capitalism as well. But her resolve to crony capitalism would be like some sort of socialism or communism. My approach to it would be more of a mixed economy of like what our European friends do.
Yeah. So, like, social democracy, is that what you're going for?
Um, I think that's what they call it, but I go into like the details of it that basically you've got capitalism for a backbone, but you put a cap on you put regulations on capitalism to make sure that nothing gets too much money or too much power that they can outbuy justice. And then we have social programs, not socialism, but social programs to
Yes.
develop a strong welfare state.
Yeah. I'm probably further to the left than that. I kind of lean more towards the socialism end of things just because, like, I'm just immersing myself in Marxist theory and stuff like that, and it's kind of compelling to me. Like, I like the way that capitalism is framed by Marx and the Marxist philosophers, and I'm kind of teeter-tottering between those things. But like, if I have to define myself politically with a label, it would probably be like libertarian socialism, because I'm kind of like,
It's just all kinds of places on the political spectrum, isn't there?
yeah, I'm far down. Like, if you look at the political compass, I'm like 9 down. I'm kind of like an anarchist almost. So,
Believe it or not, so am I.
yeah.
When I took the political compass test, I ended up to the left and down just a little bit. Not quite anarchy, but close to it.
Hmm.
And I think that's what confuses people is that when I see something that pushes for regulation against people, like like take man spreading, for example,
Hmm.
I'm against it because, well, for one, I don't really feel that's exerting toxic masculinity, and two, it's not taking up too much space. I'm not going to use the argument that men have balls because, I mean,
Yeah.
I've sat with my legs crossed before too. It's possible for males to sit with their legs closed, but the thing is that men and women both sit with their legs open. It's just a comfortable way to sit. And all that really is regulating how someone can sit. And that's a really bizarre concept to me to have the government come in and try and tell you how you can and cannot sit because a small fringe group is offended by it.
Yeah, like, would you lump that in with your, because I saw you kind of are critical of like social justice and political correctness. Is that like one of those things?
Yeah, I am critical of it because of those types of reasons. And there's also some things that I feel that have hurt the gay rights movement that happened from the 90s. Like we kind of won that debate because science came in and we did a bunch of tests on neurology and psychology. Come to find out that sexual orientation, sexual identity, these things are really kind of involuntary. And for this group of people to step out and say that it's a social construct and that if you wouldn't date a trans person, then you're transphobic. No, that doesn't mean you're transphobic. It just means you're not attracted to that.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
are involuntary things.
I see where you're coming from there, but like I also see the points that people on that side are making, but like it's not good for optics, first of all, at all. Like it just makes you sound crazy when you say things like if you wouldn't date a trans person, you're a transphobe. Like it just
Yeah.
doesn't, it's not logical. You know what I mean?
No, no, it isn't logical. It's weird. That's like saying to a straight guy, if you don't want to date me or fuck me, then you're homophobic.
Right.
It's like, they're just not a homosexual. It's just all there
Exactly.
is to it.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's weird how the left will get authoritarian like that when they start talking about things like that. It's like they want to direct people's behaviors. It doesn't
Well,
really, it's
it's
not
like,
what we're supposed to be about, I don't think.
no, I think when I look at certain aspects of social justice, and that's where I think I find my respect for ContraPoints is I don't feel like she wants to hold like a metaphorical gun up to someone's head and say, you have to do these things, otherwise you're a horrible, nasty person. I
Yeah.
don't see that in her.
I don't think
She
so either, yeah. She's
she's
like
not
one
like
of my favorites.
she's not like Riley Dennis.
Exactly, yeah. The infamous Riley J. Dennis, yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, would you date a fat person? Would you date a trans person? Would you date a person of color? If you said no to any of these, then you might be a bigot.
Yeah, it takes the power away from the phrase bigotry, really, is what it does, I think.
Well, right now we have like a push from, extreme right-leaning people that are using that sort of ideology to their advantage. They're saying, well, we allowed gay rights and we allowed this and that to happen. And then you look at examples like Riley Dennis and they go, oh, and look what happens. And it's like, no,
Right.
no, no, no. You have to understand this person is really stupid.
Yeah. They're bad representatives of all of the movements that they purport to support. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The other thing that I liked about ContraPoints is she looks at the people who oppose her, she looks at their viewpoint as well and goes over that. Whereas somebody like previous, like even Steve Shives won't do that. Steve Shives will not look at his counter arguers' points. He won't do it. But at least like the videos that I've seen by ContraPoints, she actually does look at what they have to say. And she like embodies that in sort of a character. She has like a hyperbolic left and a hyperbolic right, and she pretends to be this host where that she watches them debate each other when really all three are just her. So that says to me that she understands not only like their the points that they're trying to make, but she understands the arguments that they're making as well.
Yeah. I think that part of her channel is genius. The like sketch parts where she's playing the characters. It's
Well,
it's like yeah.
she's really looking at both sides of the argument. She knows her place, but she's taken the time to look into what the other arguments are, not just extreme right and alt right, but um, other leftist fields that are kind of anti-SJW.
Hmm.
She looks at those as well, and I respect her for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad she exists because it's like a bridge over to the other side almost. This is the way I see it because she does look at the actual arguments that are presented. And I don't think a lot of people in the social justice circles do that nowadays at all.
Well, even in the neo-skeptic field, you don't have everybody doing that. They stick to their side, and it's like, I've been told by people that I kind of do that on my channel, that I'll look at both sides of the argument, both the left and the right, and tell you my take on it after I look at both sides of the argument.
I've been kind of wanting to do more videos like that where I like respond to something, but it's like the day is so fast, and like every day there's more shit to like sift through. So it's kind of hard, but I know that it would probably get my channel a little bit more attention if I started doing that. So,
you know, honestly, when I started my channel, I started off as just doing video games, and I started doing these really weird things with my video games where I started putting in like I tried to find like music, and I wanted to kind of paint a picture with the lyrics and with the sound, and ultimately ended up making something that somebody else coined this term. He was like he runs like an art site. He called my video game videos, he called it video game video art. And some of those got put into forums, and they got recognized by different people on Twitter. And I wanted to do like skepticism because, and I talked about this with the Gothic Republican, that, you know, one of the people that influenced me was Penn and Teller's bullshit. And I was like, you know, that's something that I wanted to do, is like try to help people and warn people, like, you know, hey, don't listen to this. This is bullshit. This is feeding you false information. And so I went on the search for something, and I came across something called resume whitening. And at this time, when I did that video on resume whitening, I was looking at like HR, the human resources, like main website. Like it was like an organization of like the top notch of human resources, and looking at, is this something that they would even consider doing? And the answer is no. And I called colleges, and I talked to academic professors. I talked to career guidance counselors, and talked to a bunch of people. I even talked to a family member of mine that she's a college professor, and I asked her about this study. She said, that doesn't sound like something that was peer reviewed. That's an academic study. And I was like, oh, so you've not heard of this? And she said, no, never. And the weird thing is that resume whitening was written by people in academia. So I thought that was very bizarre. So they wrote it. They did their own little kind of not so scientific social study. It wasn't following the rules of what you would actually do for a study. And they published it, but it was never peer reviewed, and it's not recognized as a legitimate study. And the article that published it doesn't acknowledge that. But at that point in time, I was also doing things like on economics, like increasing minimum wage is actually a bad idea. That makes it so that what that does is it causes inflation. And there's another leftist economic professor that introduced the idea of saying, instead of increasing minimum wage, what we need to do is create industrial growth. And this is what the United States and many other countries have done to get out of economic depressions before, is create economic growth, such as, you know, you had Ford building cars, and you had the invention of the internet. These things were both things that got us out of an economic collapse. And right now we find ourselves in an economic collapse, and we haven't gotten out of it. We're not in a thriving economy yet. As much as Trump has done, he's not like, yeah, the Dow Jones is up, but so what? The jobs available on the table are still shit jobs. And that's the problem, is that we can't get a job that makes the middle class big and the lower class small, and the standard of living for the lower class should be raised. And that's what you want to see. That's the sign of a healthy economy. The upper class, I'm not really concerned about. That's the 1%. It doesn't really change almost no matter what you do. So right now what we're seeing is a shrinking middle class and an ever-expanding lower class, which makes up 56% of the American population. And I did this in response to a TJ Kirk video that he did about increasing minimum wage. I was like, no, 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 it doesn't work. And so my proposal was, if you want to see industrial growth, one thing that the United States people have been asking for a long time now, legalize marijuana. You will
Yeah,
see an industrial boom, and there you will have jobs.
I would have to agree with that. Yeah, that would be one of the first things I would do is legalize weed if I was
So
in charge.
at that point, I was seeing videos from the skeptic community
Right.
about social justice, and I thought that was a conspiracy. I was like, these are all conspiracy nuts. They don't know what they're talking about. Then I ran into it in real life where it's like, I got accused of sexual harassment on a female, and I'm like, I'm a homosexual dude. How does that fucking work? And they said, well, it doesn't matter that you're homosexual. You made her uncomfortable. And I'm like, what?
What? What happened? What was the situation here? What?
Well, I basically called her a brown noser. I said, I don't know whoever it is that she knows. I just hope whoever it is that she knows, at least the pussy tastes good for her. And
So
it's
you
like,
made a
that's,
joke. You made a critical joke, and then
yes,
you were accused of sexual harassment.
yes,
That,
yes.
yeah, that also gives us a bad name, I would say. That's one of those terrible practices that the left tends to do, is just over what's the word I'm looking for? We accuse people too much.
Yes.
Too
Yeah.
much too much accusations flying around, which I mean, not to bring up the popular fucking hot news of the week, but like how do you feel about Brett Kavanaugh? Just out of curiosity.
I haven't been paying attention too much to that, but I was like, so basically this is my understanding of Kavanaugh. Okay, so he gets accused by somebody that of something that happened, like, what was it, 36 years ago, 37 years ago, something like that.
A long time, yeah.
Yeah. So then that becomes like this burden of proof is needed,
Yeah.
because we want to maintain secularist philosophy of innocent until proven guilty.
And due process included with
Well,
that.
yeah, because we don't want to return to the witch trial days of, like,
Exactly.
I don't like this person, so I'm going to accuse them of this, and therefore they get exiled, ostracized, and, put through the third degree.
Mm.
You don't want that. You want to know for sure that that person is guilty. We've seen already far too many innocent people go to prison, and they spent a long time in prison, and like even 30 years later they come to find out, well, this person didn't actually commit the crime, and they get released. This is also why I'm not a fan of the death penalty.
Yeah, because too many people get wrongfully executed for things that they didn't do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's only one reason. A second reason is it doesn't deter crime, so it's a pointless, needless death.
Yep.
So
Also, I don't think that the government should be like allowed to kill people like that. Like I don't like I
we
for
should
some
be beyond that at this point, of that's
yeah,
such barbarism.
it might be a slippery slope argument that I'm making, but like if the wrong guy's in charge, he could kill you for anything if he could kill you for something. That's the way I see it.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think, yeah, that is a lot of power for someone to have, to say, I'm going to end your life.
Hmm. But back to the Kavanaugh thing. I don't think you were finished with your thoughts.
No, no, I wasn't finished. So Kavanaugh, so essentially it becomes his word versus hers, and they're looking for people who were involved in it, and they're not having a lot of hope on that. They're not getting a lot of feedback from it, and so I don't really know. Like, the right is saying that he's being falsely accused, and you don't know that for sure. You don't know,
Right.
because we don't have any evidence to support that. Well, and then the left is saying that he's guilty. And it's like,
Hmm.
well, you don't know that either. This is literally his word versus her word. And that's a very, very difficult situation.
This is the problem with I think just trials about this subject of sexual assault and rape and things like that, because what actually happened, my ex-girlfriend got raped earlier this year, and they went to court, and the guy got off because there was no evidence of it happening. So it can actually happen both ways. Like, girls will lie and get away with it, and the guy will go to prison wrongfully, but also guys will do it and then get away with it because there was no like sufficient evidence. So it's really a tricky situation in the courts, and I really don't know how to fix that. Like,
Well, and some things you can't. I mean, we don't live in a perfect world. If people were honest, which I mean that's one thing that I don't like about like the whole communism and socialism thing, is that the idea that one day everybody's going to hold hands together. I just don't have that much faith in humanity. I think that there's a level of barbarism to many different people, and most people are not going to be honest. I find it interesting, though, if you look at statistics on people who are atheists, they are more honest and less likely to commit crimes than theists.
which
So I
makes
find
sense.
that
But also, like, there's always the issue with stats with demographics that like there's so much less atheists than theists. It's like hard to, you know what I mean?
yeah. But I've seen theists use their religion to rationalize what it is that they're doing. They'll say things like, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay if I do this because all I have to do is ask my God for forgiveness. Whereas, like, I as an atheist, I'm like, that person has one shot at life.
Yeah,
Why would I do anything detrimental to screw that up?
right. Like, it's when you believe in things like that, I think it takes away from your experience in this plane of existence. Like, because you're not that focused on it. You're more focused on what comes afterwards. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't think that's a good way of living. I kind of reject religion overall as well, just because I think it puts your brain in a box and only allows you to think certain things. And I hate that about any system that does that.
Well, and it's not to say like I look at communism and socialism, and I realize that we live in a social, like, well, not social, but we live in a liberal democracy, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah.
and we have capitalism, and maybe there is something other than that, but we just haven't thought of it yet. And maybe we need to be patient for that thing to come along because society is changing things. We have this technological burst where a lot of manual labor is being replaced by machines, and
Hmm.
we as a society across the board on a global scale are going to have to accommodate to that because our system of commodity and commerce will have to change to keep up with that. It
It will.
will.
Yeah.
It just will.
Automation is changing things already. Like, you go to McDonald's, they have the computer system thing you can put your order into. Pretty soon, those people behind the counter aren't even going to be there. Like,
Well, actually, that's already started. I
yeah,
worked for McDonald's as a manager for 11 years, and I can tell you there are two stores that already exist that are fully automated.
that's like crazy. That's like really the future is now. Like,
Yeah, you got things like but I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing because some of the manual labor things that we do cause a lot of physical harm to a person. This is that I've referred to it in several videos that I say that we live in a neo-industrial revolution
hmm,
type era. Because during, like the beginning of the 1900s, we called that the Industrial Revolution, and we had that's where Karl Marx steps in, late
yeah,
1800s, early 1900s, and you had these industries that were working people literally to death or to the point of ill health,
yeah,
and I'm seeing that happen again. I'm seeing, people with developing carpal tunnel, people with damaged nerves, damaged tendons, and things like that. And the companies should be or are supposed to be held responsible for that. You're supposed to have workers' comp claims and stuff like that. This is a job-related injury, and believe it or not, one of the things that they were fighting against the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s was working over 50 hours a week
yeah.
because they were doing this. Well, we're doing it again. There's people working 55. The reason I slept in so late, I've been working 55-hour work weeks in a warehouse.
Damn.
So that's a crazy thing to, I think, do and ask of people to do. That, I mean, we're human beings. We're not machines. We need rest. We need sleep. We need nourishment. We need social interaction. This is important. Especially if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, interaction is important.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do when you're working 55 hours. And when that happened, Karl Marx was a bleeding heart, as many liberals are. They're bleeding hearts. They care about the people, and they go, "Oh, this can't be. We can't do this to the people." And so Karl Marx came up with the philosophy of communism and socialism. And as he published it, it was fixing itself at the time because you had the original liberals coming out, like John Locke, that came out, and there was also a book published called The Jungle that talked about the issues and the working environments that these people were working in, like people losing limbs, and it just went into a hot dog.
Yeah.
Those were things that actually happened. Coal miners was a big issue for that book, The Jungle. And then we came up with things like OSHA and OBRA. And I'm looking at the multi-conglomerate major corporations today, and it's like, well, they've figured out loopholes to this. And so we're seeing
figured out how to, yeah, we changed the system for the people, and then the corporations figured out how to change the system for their own benefit behind the scenes.
Right. So I'm looking at it like maybe we don't need communism or socialism, because that seems to be the underlying enemy is crony capitalism, that ability to buy justice.
Yeah.
And it's like with this, you don't need to attack people's civil liberties and freedoms to vape. All you need to do is demand that they're open and honest, that this is not healthy to consume, but I support your right to do it, if that so be your choice. Because as I was saying before, this is your one and only shot. I mean, if this improves my quality of life, if this makes me happy, who is anyone else to judge?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's actually like a solid iron argument, is the thing that, like, I should be able to put in my body whatever I want, you know?
Well, and I'm very extreme on anti-authoritarian liberalism, is that like I would support drugs being legal across, like I would support all drugs being legal.
Me too, actually, yeah. And I got called like a retard for that last night. I told my friend that. He's like, "What?" Yeah.
It's a very extreme thing. It's hard for people to visualize, but it's like, well, there are other countries that have made things legal that you would not think of making legal, like heroin.
Mm-hmm.
Canada has heroin havens, and they've seen a decline in heroin overdoses. They've seen a decline in HIV rates among heroin users because of heroin havens, because they're treating the addiction like an addiction,
Right.
not a crime.
It should be a medical concern instead of a criminal concern. And the other thing is that it would actually take the power away from the drug cartels if all the drugs were legal, because the legislative, the government only cares about the supply part of the drug industry. They're not considering the demand. They don't even think of the fact that you can't stop people from using this stuff. Like, they're going to want to, especially when they're in a greater system of unhappiness of this crony capitalism that's taken over, where it's like it's kind of necessary to turn off and get high once in a while. You know what I mean? It's like,
oh yeah,
it's like a necessity at this point. We got to do that to get by, I think. That's why we need to revolutionize things, as far as I'm concerned. Like,
well, and see, so that in that sense, that would make me a progressivist, because I want to see the society progress forward in the sense that we make things less restrictive and give people more liberties and more freedoms.
yeah.
And that's where I have the philosophy where you have to have a line, because you don't want so much freedom that an authoritative dictator can come in and dictate onto people. So that's where I come up with that philosophy of, I believe in choices, not one's ability to impose one's will on others against their own will. And that's where I have problems with social justice, is because they do things like, well, if you misgender me, then that's a crime. And it's like, well, I think maybe it's a social taboo, but I don't think it should be a crime.
Right. Because I think actually making those things illegal uh, amplifies the other side,
It
honestly. Because
does.
if you just left it as like you have the freedom to be an asshole, then there'd be less assholes, I think.
Well, and you could easily identify it. You'd be like, okay, that
Right.
guy's an asshole.
Exactly. And that's where it ends. Like I'm not gonna fine you for calling Contra a man. Like you know what I mean?
Well, and the truth is like I have non-binary, gender fluid friends, and I've asked them about it. I go, how do you feel about the 30 protected non-binary gender pronouns in California and New York? And they even agree with me as anti-authoritarian leftists themselves. They agree with me that it shouldn't be a law.
Yeah.
And they are not offended. They don't start going triggered, triggered, triggered if I
Right.
call them by their biological gender. Because
Right.
I mean that's just how I know them as.
Honestly, I think those types of things you kind of choose to care or not to care about when you're in that situation of not like fitting perfectly into your biological gender. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of because it's more of an internal thing. It's more of like an internal struggle. So, like, externalizing it and putting it on other people is kind of like your own, like, prerogative to do that.
It was almost like you're expecting people to be magic angel babies and be able to read their mind.
Right.
And you can't do that.
Right.
That's not possible. I don't possess special mind powers, do you?
No, I mean, sometimes I wish I did, but
Well, I think we all do. I think we all wish we had. I think that there is a desire to want to believe in the supernatural because that means that there could be something more. But we have to look at the facts. The fact of the matter is that I can't read people's minds, and I know that you
mm,
can't either.
mm,
As Bill Maher said, like to theists, he said, I know that you don't know for sure that there's a life after death because I don't know, and I don't possess special mind powers, so neither do you.
exactly. Yeah, we're all human beings.
Right. So I mean, like if I approach somebody that identified as some kind of mixed genderizing, like I embody, like somebody who embodies some different level of masculine and feminine traits and wants to turn it into a brand new gender, I'm not going to
Right.
know that. And so, like, if I approach them and I'm like, hey, dude, or something like that, and they're like, no, I prefer to be called this.
Mm,
I'd be like, okay, I'm incredibly unfamiliar, but I'm not gonna be a dick about it.
mm.
But if they're like a nasty, mean person, I might do it just because they're a nasty, mean person.
Yeah, you still have to, if you want to be respected, you have to be respectful. Like it goes both
Right.
ways. But
Right.
I agree with their premise, I think. I agree with the fact that gender to some extent or to most of its extent is kind of like performance. It's like the clothes you wear and what you do with your physical appearance. And that's like the way that pronouns kind of work. Because if you're a passing trans girl, no one's gonna know. You know what I mean? Like they're just gonna call you she on face value. So like I think it's like it's a societal construct with a biological and social component to it. That's how I phrase things because I don't like to be inaccurate for the sake of ideological commitment. I'm not just gonna deny the biological component of things because it exists, but I don't think that it's set in stone because you can change your biology with things like hormones. So,
You can change it to a point,
mm.
but like
But the thing about the chromosome argument is that no one asks you that. Like no in conversation nobody gives a fuck about your chromosomes, right? So like
no.
it doesn't it doesn't really hold water, I don't think.
No, but there are biological aspects that we cannot fix, such as like in male to female transition. We don't have the ability to give you functioning ovaries and
Yeah.
fallopian tubes.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I mean, I kind of wish that we did, because like I wish it was just as simple as, oh, you can snap your fingers and bam, you're exactly how you want to be. But like it's not. It's almost like a tragedy that way. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the weird thing is like in transitioning, I've talked to trans people about this before, is that the biological features from male to female, like the surgery is a lot easier from male to female. The hormones are the tricky part. And then from female to male, the surgery is the tricky part, because
Mm-hmm.
we cannot create a penis out of vaginal tissue. We don't have
Yeah.
that technology. And we do to an extent, but it's not going to function in the sense of like what a male's penis does. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's not, it's not going to. We cannot create a fully functioning penis using skin grafts and extending the clitoris out. You might be able to stimulate the actual nerve endings and create an orgasm, but you will not create something that is going to ejaculate.
Right.
We cannot create testicles. We cannot create, and the penis size will not be, you know, very great at
Mm-hmm.
that.
Well, the genital part is where it gets squirrely, I think, because like if you are passing, you're gonna have that's gonna have to come out at some point. Like, you know what I mean? Especially if you are if you don't get that operation, because like most, I don't know if it's most, but I can't really think of an example of somebody I know who's gotten the genital surgery part. Usually it's just like, oh, I have a girl dick. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's what they call it, the female penis or
mm,
something like that. But well, I had a female to male trans person that was interested in me a while back, and you know, he had the male aesthetic. You know,
right.
he looked like a male, and I thought he as a male was attractive as the male aesthetic.
Yeah.
But then when it got down to the genitals, well, the truth of the matter is he still had a vagina down there. Granted, his clitoris had grown to an oversized clitoris, but it still smelled like vagina down there. And
Right.
that's not
Which,
something I'm interested in as a homosexual male.
right.
And he got really offended about that and said, basically called me a bigot for that, saying that I was like, and I'm like, look, genitals are a deal breaker. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
Yeah.
I wish I could see beyond it. I wish I could, but I just can't. There's software running in the background that is just instinctual nature, and I can't will myself to be attracted to that if I'm not. It's just either you
Exactly.
are or you're not.
Some people, you know, the whole pansexual thing where it's like people just claim that they can be attracted to like any combination of genitals and
Yeah.
other aspects of gender at all. It's like that seems like the best option right now to be. Like if that's your sexuality, you're kind of lucky because you can roll with anything. Like
And that's how I see it. I see it as they're lucky. They've got a lot of fish in the sea. They've got
exactly.
more than anyone else.
Exactly. But as like a gender non-conforming guy, like I wear makeup and shit, and I'm kind of like a cross dresser. Uh, I've noticed that on the internet, especially, straight dudes are easy to trick. Like it, it's kind of easy to be a trap. You know what I mean? Like
So you're unintentionally trapping.
exactly. It's weird. It's weird. The DMs I get, it's a little overwhelming.
Well, I think some guys are insecure with themselves, and they find it attractive, they find it tantalizing, they find it appealing, and
Mm,
they might know about it, but if you tell them about it, then they're
mm.
like, no, 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 shh, 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 shh. And to me, that's like an insecurity with their own sexuality.
Yeah, which is it's probably pretty hard to define their sexuality. It's like they could end up deciding that they're just gay. They could end up deciding that they're straight, but they were, you know, tricked.
They're bisexual, like, and when you get into the bisexual thing, you're looking at a spectrum, because
Mm,
um You might lean more towards females, you might lean more towards males. I mean, there's many shades of gray in the bisexuality field. Like me, I'm 100% hardcore homosexual. I've never had a sexual thought about a female ever.
I think a lot of people actually still. It's weird because I live in Maine, and it's a blue state, but it's kind of homophobic at the same time. Like a lot of the attitudes that people espouse and things that they say, it's like it yeah, we're not caught up with the rest of the liberal part of the country, I don't think. But maybe it's just the fact that I live in the rural part. But like a lot of people, like my friends, they can't even conceive that someone like you could exist, which it must be kind of weird for you to hear that, but people still don't understand that some guys just don't like chicks. You know?
Well, I didn't choose it. I didn't wake up one day and I
Right.
was like, I mean, I actually wanted to be heterosexual. Like I was, because that's the norm. Even though like I grew up with hippies and they didn't give a shit, and I was just not young and naive and didn't know that at the time. But when I came out of the closet to my father, he was like, I know. I heard you fucking your boyfriend in the room next to me.
Damn. Yeah. Usually that's what I hear is like you come up to your parents and they're like, "Yeah, we get it." Like
Well, you know what's really weird is I live in a red state, and there's a lot of Republicans here, and they don't have a problem with it.
yeah. It's like the whole or most of the country is shifted to being accepting of that.
Yeah. So
Like
when I
they'll
hear when I
even
hear
if
of,
they okay, I'll let you finish.
I was so sorry, but it's weird to me that like over here, even the conservatives over here are like, well, we don't care about like homosexuality, transgenders, all that stuff. They don't care about that. Like
Mm.
when they say conservative, they mean like traditional values and everything like that. But they're not concerned about they're for gay rights, they're for women's rights and all that.
Mm.
So it's weird to me to hear that there's still areas that are like deeply homophobic or deeply racist. Like
Yeah, but it
if
exists.
I know, but if you talk to a black person up here in the state that I live in, and you ask them, do you want to go to the East Coast? They'll tell you, no, that's the
Mm.
most racially divisive place in the United
Yeah,
States right now. No.
yeah.
Because up here in this red state, nobody gives a shit.
Yeah, well, I think they're probably like right libertarian. You know what I mean? Like there's a live and let live attitude that I can respect. Like even if they don't understand it because they're not like interested enough to like think about like gender theory and like sexuality on a deep level, they'll still let you do what you want to do, which is it's better than being like a complete dolt and being all like mean about everything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they definitely have a you do your thing, I'll do my thing attitude
Exactly.
up here until you get into the rural areas, and then
Yeah.
it becomes very divisive. And so that's what I find weird is that when I talk to people, especially people who live in older areas that have, you know, like that are essentially bigger cities, and I see these racial divisions and these gender divisions, and I'm like, why does that exist in an area that's supposed to be more progressive than the area that I live in? Come
Mm.
to find out, many folks on the East Coast, especially in the southern regions of the East Coast, still have a um, a national divisiveness of the South versus the North.
Yeah,
So
that's
they
still
just
there as
view me as
well.
a Yankee.
Yeah, yeah. It's
You're
pretty
one of those
weird.
progressive Yankee people, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
That still exists.
Yeah, well, it's you know what's weirder actually? I think it's honestly just like rural small town culture maybe because like we have people I see like you drive past people's houses, they have Confederate flags waving outside of it. It's like this is Maine. Like we were the North. Like what are you talking about? Like you know what I mean? Like some people are just consumed by this weird cultural thing that's like super right wing traditionalist, homophobic, racist. type of deal.
Well, and so like I was analyzing my own thoughts before on how I feel about patriotism. And I feel that patriotism is dangerous no matter if it's about your state, your country, or even globalism. Like if you're an extreme globalist, I think that becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
Then you're married, you've married yourself to an idea, and you've stopped being skeptical of things, and then that allows the ability for things to like I would defend this country, but not because it's the United States. I'm not going to bow before a flag. I'm not going
Hmm.
to bow before my nation. I'm going to defend it because this is the country I live in, and I want it to be free. I want to be free, and I want the
Yeah.
people within it to be free.
People are obsessed with the idea of America, and they don't understand that that's pretty much a facade. Like it's not. It's a lie. With the flag stuff and the people burning their own clothes because people won't stand for the anthem. It's like that you're consumed by illusion.
Right, and somebody told me that that they would be offended if I burned an American flag, and I'm like, well, that's because the flag represents something to you. I said the flag is nothing
Hmm.
more to me than a piece of cotton or whatever it's made out of.
Hmm.
That's all it is. Me burning the flag is not representational or symbology or an effigy of anything. It's just me burning a piece of fabric.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to deliver onto people is that you give them doubt, is that that's what we call dogma. You're believing in something at that
Exactly.
point.
Exactly. And I would argue that what they believe in isn't real. Like I was told, I posted something on some social media something, and I said like I used to just stand respectfully when there's like the Pledge of Allegiance and omit the under God line. So like I just wouldn't say anything because like I just don't like that that's in there because I know it wasn't originally in there, and I feel like it's sort of theocratic propagandizement. But I'm thinking about just not standing at all because I don't want to worship a flag. Like I don't want to submit myself to the cult of complacency in America. And I was told like, what about the troops that fought for your right to do that? And my retaliation was the troops didn't fight for my right to do that. They fought for the pockets of the rich and oil. Like, you know what I mean? Like the things that these people believe in that the flag represents aren't real. It's all an illusion to uh, keep you from thinking for yourself. Is what how I see it.
Well, isn't that what dictators do? Is they try this uniformity thing? I
Yeah.
mean, Joseph Stalin did it. Hitler did it. They want the uniformity. And what people forget is that the founding fathers of this country wanted you to think for yourself. They actually, one of them even said, it is not your right, it is your responsibility as an American citizen to constantly question your government. So
Yes.
I never stood for the national anthem because I deemed it pointless. And I see myself as a patriot in the sense that I do my duty to constantly question the government and make sure that they are not becoming dictators over the people,
Hmm.
because this country is supposed to be for the people, by the people. Meaning
Yeah.
that when we say when 98% of the United States citizens want marijuana legalized across the board recreationally and medicinally, they need to abide by that because that is how the Constitution has been written.
Yeah. They're definitely not serving popular interest at all.
No, and that's a problem. It's like we said we wanted it, why aren't we getting it?
Yeah, because the government was written to be the people. Like that's the point.
Yes.
So
So
the foundational ideas of America, like the way that it was written, I believe in that. I don't believe in the weird, like abstract patriotic nationalism that people believe in nowadays. You know what I mean?
well, and South Park brought up something a long time ago in one of their older episodes, that we do have this ability to have both embodiments of both these mentalities in the United States, of my mentality of, no, I'm not going to stand for the flag. And I'm a patriot in the sense that I constantly question what my government is doing. And is this the right course of action? Is this going to make us look bad in the future, as history is written down as like what we did with slaves, or what we did in persecuting homosexuals? And I mean, is this the right thing to do? That makes me a patriot, but it also makes the people who are patriots that stand up for what their government do. So we can have both sides, these both types of patriotism. One seems antithetical, but it is actually patriotism. And then you have the other supporting the government. So you have both kind of sides being recorded into history, of the people who are critical of what our own nation was doing, and the people who are supportive of what our own nation was doing. So you get both sides of the argument recorded into history. And that's really kind of a unique thing.
Yeah, yeah. I see that now, because like the whole point is that we're supposed to be able to have both coexisting.
Yes, for a reason.
Right. Those two sides of the same coin are always necessary, I think.
So you don't want to silence one or the other. You want
Exactly.
both of them to be able to speak. So that way, as we look on it in the past, we can say, well, America was correct in doing it for these reasons, but they were wrong for doing it for these reasons, because you had both voices in that argument.
So we can weigh things evenly.
Right.
Hopefully that's what happens in the history books of the future. Hopefully it's even-handed, because usually the winners write the history books.
Well, I mean, I mean, look at Genghis Khan. I mean, we never critique him on the crusades that he's done.
It's weird though, like the time that's passed since an atrocity, like it's completely okay to talk about the positive sides of things of that people like Genghis Khan did, but like if you say things like that about Hitler, it's like, whoa, you know what I mean?
Well, and that's the funny thing to me, when people say that history was written by those who won, but not by those who lost. And it's like, well, we don't really look at people like Joseph Stalin and Hitler in a good light. We look at him in a very we look at both of them in a very negative light. Even Mussolini. It's
Yeah.
just like these were not good people. They didn't end up writing history, did they?
In the end, they did lose to America. Like,
But they were barbaric. I mean,
indeed.
like, we do not stand for the concept of killing people on an ideological principle.
Even though we engage in that as a nation, like we'll go overseas and we'll shoot people and we'll claim that it's for spreading democracy, even though we toppled their democratically elected leader and put in a dictator. Like our imperialistic ways are hopefully going to be recorded, because like if not, then that's highly dangerous. That just means it'll continue.
Well, but you still have people like us speaking out against what George W. Bush Jr. did, invading Iraq, that posed no threat to us. And we have it all captivated and video logged, but he got him in front of the cameras, in front of the press, going, weapons of mass destruction, weapons of
Right.
mass destruction. Go over there. Where are the weapons of mass destruction, George? Where are they? Oh, they don't exist, do they?
Yeah.
Why were we over there? Yeah.
Yeah. I still feel like a lot of people aren't awake with that. At least the people that I've talked to.
I see people on the right that are awake to that. They know. They know. They go, that was a big mistake. And but the thing is you got to look at these presidential figures as not completely demonized or heroinized. You have to look at them as specifically what it is that they do. Like Donald Trump. Many people love to make fun of Donald Trump, and I'm at the point where I'm just kind of sick of hearing it, because nobody really wants to tackle the issues that he's actually done. They're all like, he's a racist, he's a bigot.
Yeah.
And he may very well be, I don't know. But I can tell you, he signed some things into act that are very, very poisonous. Very, very bad. Like FOSTA. FOST is a horrible thing. It comes wrapped in the guise of being anti sex trafficking, which is good. We're against sex trafficking. I'd be against that. But that bill is more than that. That bill essentially makes it so that not only like if an unlawful sex, and they're very liberal at how they interpret an unlawful sex act. Essentially, any kind of sexual interaction where you exchange money or anything could be determined as an unlawful sex act. That FOSTA Act will not only hold the individual accountable, not only the website accountable, but the internet service provider accountable, and it's retroactive, which is unconstitutional. So this was a power grab.
Right.
And that act, that FOSTA Act, has the ability to destroy any dating app or website out there.
Huh.
Grindr, Tinder, Adam and Eve, like you name it, it could destroy those. Like not hold just the individual. So the individual who engaged in it will go to jail. The website itself will be shut down, and the ISP will be penalized of, I think it was up to like $7 million. Can't remember what the price tag on that was, but it was a hefty fine, hefty enough to where the ISPs such as Comcast, Time Warner, AOL Time Warner, Spectrum now, they would not house such an application or website. They wouldn't do it. It's too much of a risk for them.
So why do you think people are going after like things like that, like the internet? Because we also have the net neutrality issue. It seems like the government is trying to, in league with the corporations, they're trying to screw over the common man when it comes to things like the internet, which should be like the Wild West as far as I'm concerned. Like it should be like just total freedom on the internet. Like,
well, that's the thing that pissed me off about Ajit Pai is what they didn't see. Trump is supposed to be for economic growth, and what he didn't understand, and I think he's just too old to know how the internet works, honestly. And I think he thinks it's a good idea, and I think Ajit Pai basically is like a used car salesman and just slung that shit at him and won the debate. And Trump was like, "Yeah, sounds like a great idea." But what I don't think they understood is that there was a growing, thriving economy existing on the internet, especially with social media and like people like the skeptic community coming out and exposing mainstream media like CNN and Fox for reporting biased bullshit.
yeah.
And it's like you have professors and people from academia coming on here giving basically college level academics on YouTube. And it's like they should be paid to do that. That is an awesome thing. That will help us grow as a society because knowledge is power. It's like I encourage people to know things. And this is a way for them to know it where the professor is getting paid and the person is not, there's no expense on the individual. If they want to learn about it, they can. And so that's a beautiful thing. And Ajit Pai just came in and squashed that.
Yeah. Well, overall, there's like a new, I would phrase it as like a new Gutenberg revolution going on with things like just YouTube in general and things like podcasts, because you can use the time that you're doing to do other like busy things, listening to information that will like enrich your life and expand your mind. So it's kind of scary that they're trying to crack down on that because it's a beautiful thing. Like it's the next informational age being ushered in is how I would conceptualize it.
Yes, absolutely. That's probably why InfoWars called themselves InfoWars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Alex Jones believed that he was like crusading against the elites to bring the truth to the people. Like that's why he named it that. Yeah.
I mean, as much as a conspiratorial nut as he was, I still support his right to go on and spew his nonsense. And it's like, well, you can spew your nonsense and I'm going to come and criticize it.
Exactly. That's what we should have done. They should not have taken him off.
Right. And what's really weird is Richard Spencer's still on here, and
Yeah.
nobody. And I've criticized Richard Spencer. I feel like the very few skeptics will criticize him because they're afraid of the alt-right trolls trying to flag down their channel. And believe me,
Yeah.
I've made a few videos about the alt-right, and man, they love to troll me. They love to troll me. Just recently, I had one come on to one of my attacking the alt-right videos, and they said, "You're the reason why we need another Holocaust."
Fuck.
And I was like, okay, I'll bite. Why? Didn't respond. Because I have a tendency when I see these alt-right trolls, I'll make a video about them. I'm like, okay, hey guys, look at what this alt-right troll said to me. Let's talk about it.
If it gets too bad, I probably would stop doing that because, like, you don't want to give them a megaphone.
No, I love making fun of them. There's
Yeah.
a saying from KMFDM where they say, we used to hate people, but now we make fun of them. It's more effective that way. Which is ironic because they're kind of in that sort of leftist social anarchical type
Yeah.
category. And people don't listen to that kind of philosophy. They're like, no, we have to shut them down. And it's like, no, just make fun of them.
Yeah. I miss the whimsical anarcho-socialists, honestly. Like, it's better that way. They
I've
give
had many
more
people say
humor.
that I remind them of the 90s liberal. I don't know. I don't know where the left has gone, but I feel like a lot of people don't understand what an anti-authoritarian leftist is anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You know, I grew up with kind of that mentality of DIY and fuck you, don't tell me what to do. You know, that used to be the standpoint of hippies, goths, and punks is
Exactly. Yeah.
fuck you, don't tell me what to do. Didn't matter if it came from the left or the right. It was just, no, fuck you. Don't tell me what to do. Don't censor me. Don't silence me. Don't tell
Which
me how to dress. Don't tell me what to say. Don't tell me what to believe.
individuality, really, is what that is.
Yes. Yeah. And that was one of the problems another problem I had with social justice. It was like it was trying to kill individuality and kind of succumb to identitarian collectivism. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Not everything belongs in a box.
It's like we took the boxes away, like we just shoved them off, and then we're like, hold on, we need new boxes. It's like people got scared. It's weird. They got scared of being out in the open.
Well, it's like you shouldn't be afraid of individual expression and just
Right.
expressing yourself as an individual.
And there's
And,
a
and
reciprocity in that, I think. It's like I will express myself and you can express yourself and I won't stop you.
right, and that should be the way that is. And
Yeah.
somewhere along the line, it became, well, that puts you in this category, and that puts you in this category, and if you're in that category, then you're a demon. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like that's the other thing that I don't like is anybody who subscribes themselves as being on the right is automatically dubbed not a real person or a bigot or
Yeah.
some kind of negative connotation. And it's like, do you know this person's standpoint? Like the Gothic Republican, he's not a homophobe. He's not a transphobe. He's not a xenophobe of any kind. He's not a bigot. He's just conservative. He believes in holding the door open for people, being polite, being respectful to your elders, and he does kneel before or not kneel, but he does salute the flag and support the troops and everything. Whereas, like, you know, I might be skeptical of going to war. I might be skeptical of why we do these things. And I do wish that we could embark in a day and age where war is no longer needed, but unfortunately, there still are very much real live threats to not just the Western nation, but other nations as well. You still have dictators out there. So that's human nature. Human nature can be very dark. I think that's probably the difference between the philosophy of a hippie and the philosophy of the goth. Is goths tend to look at humanity as being dark.
Yeah.
That there's this underlying barbarism to humanity, and it's like you have to get yourself to the point of understanding your own primal instincts and ignoring them, of understanding that violence is merely the primitive reaction to that which you cannot control, and unfortunately most people do not recognize that.
Mm-hmm. These are interesting thoughts, yeah. How long have we been talking for?
I'm not sure.
I don't think anybody has been listening, but like it's still worth it, I think.
Well, I put up this live stream on my channel too, so let me
Oh, all right.
see.
Hopefully they're listening on there.
Well, usually if I'm live streaming, I try to bring it up so I can monitor the chats better.
This is the first time I've done this.
Well, I've not live streamed before. Hold on just a second.
All right.
Oh, it didn't go.
Oh shit.
Oh yeah, it did. It says Google Hangouts on air. I
Okay.
can't pull it up though for some reason. That's weird. I don't know. It says it's on air, but I can't see it.
I can see it. It's on my channel, but no one's watching.
Well, if push comes to shove, I can mirror it on my channel. It's not that big of a deal.
All right. Yeah, totally. That's a great idea, I think. But we got anything else to cover? Or?
Well, so you are a subscriber to ContraPoints, right?
Yeah, she's one of my favorite YouTubers right now.
She said one of the things that we're not talking about is the female penis and the
Yeah.
mouthfeel.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're living in a day and age where, I mean, we live in ultimately a pretty sex positive society where we can, well, I don't know, with hashtag Me Too going around, that may not be the case for long, but I think we can have a conversation that's informative and not sexual. And so like, and that's one thing that I would like if I had the opportunity to talk to her, I would talk to her or anybody about that kind of thing. Like if that's something that we should be talking about as a society, then let's have that conversation.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about it?
Not as of yet, but take that as you will, anyone listening. But I think she was making probably a larger point about the fact that people will make an anti-trans argument that if you have a dick, you're still a man. So she was saying that like actually when you take the hormones, the dick changes and it's not like a man's dick. It's like something else. That was like her larger point. So that's
Well,
probably what she wants people to spread as a message.
well, anytime you take HRT, it's going to have a profound effect on the body. That's one argument that's one thing that I would ask her if I was able to get to talk to ContraPoints is how she feels about giving kids, like children, puberty blockers, because there is a problem in doing that, is that they develop micropenis, and when that happens, they are not able to go through the surgery of basically having getting
Right.
vagina. And so it's like, I would ask her, how do you feel about that? Because a lot of people in the skeptic community and a lot of right-wing people that do support trans rights have brought that up as an issue of giving kids, like, so you recognize that your kid might be trans, and I have a problem with that too. Is that does somebody under the age, like before puberty, really know that they're like, yeah, they probably know before they hit puberty, but are you going to let them make that decision at such a young age and give
Well,
them puberty blockers?
yeah, I wouldn't. I would just do like a social transition of like, okay, I'm gonna get you women's clothes or like girls' clothes and things like that. I'm not gonna go to the doctor yet because you might decide when you hit puberty, like you might develop more testosterone, you know, like or estrogen if you're FTM. You know what I mean? Like it's
Well,
one of those things that you have to wait and see for because when you're a kid, you're developing,
right. Well,
and
and
that
you know,
means you're changing.
the frontal lobe doesn't even fully develop until you're 25.
Yeah.
And I've always said, just let nature do what nature does. I mean, you
Mhm.
know, like I didn't need any instructional video or pornography to explain to me how homosexuality worked. I pretty
This is
much had it
natural.
figured out in my head.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say to people is like, don't give children puberty blockers. Like, let nature take its course. If you have a trans child, you will find out sooner or later. And I
Mhm.
mean, just be supportive and be a parent. Never
Mhm.
stop loving your kid. That's the advice that I would give. But you do have some very extreme leftist people who are like, and actually I have one of them in my family where they literally will groom their child that way for basically progressive points. Like, look how progressive I am. I'm so accepting of my 9-year-old, you know, child that used to be a daughter that's now a non-binary Z
That's
or
dark.
her.
That's kind of
It
dark.
Yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
it's like, you did this just so you can get points on saying, like, look how much better I am than everyone else because
Right.
I'm so progressive. That's the wrong way to go about doing it, I think.
I agree.
And so I think when I attack, like, you know, like, obviously I think at this point it's not that I hate social justice warriors, it's just that I disagree with them. And
Yeah.
that's something I'm very adamant about, is attack the idea, not the person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because I have seen that level of extreme in the left of going like, I'm so progressive that I want to, you know, go above and beyond it's like that episode of South Park where they just kept handing Tweak and Craig money. It's a level of patriotism that is more insulting than somebody coming up to me and going like, you're a faggot. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, okay, clearly I'm not going to be hanging out with you because you don't like
Right.
gay people. But it's, you know, when somebody goes to that level of extreme of being like, I have to protect you and coddle you and
Mhm.
cradle you, it's like, get away from me. I don't
Yeah.
need all of that.
The devouring mother archetype. Yeah.
Yeah, it's patronizing, is what it is, and it,
Exactly.
it feels more insulting than anything.
Hmm.
It almost makes me feel like there's a like you wouldn't have to do that unless there's a part of you, just a little part of you that's uncomfortable, so you have to make up for that
Yeah. It
by
could be
going
that.
over extreme.
Yeah. It could be that, and it could be just like, oh, you don't feel like you're a good person. So like, if you do this, you're suddenly gonna feel like valid. Like, oh, I'm such a good person. You know. It's like you have a hole in your heart.
Yeah.
That's why I think people individually should like, and this is where I get kind of like Petersonian, like Jordan Peterson esque, is like you should just individually sort yourself out. Because then, if everyone did that, the world would be a better place.
Well, yeah, this has been a very interesting conversation, I'd say.
I'm glad.
I saw some of the video posts that you made. Like I saw this one where you were just kind of a free flow thought.
Yeah.
And
It was that the one in the woods?
yes,
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out what direction you were going. I was like, I think he's trying to say, basically, in the sum of it, that we think that what we do is so important, but we don't look at the grand scale of things. Like we go to our minuscule little jobs, like working at a factory or working at a warehouse or working fast food, and we go, what I do is so important. But in the grand scheme of like looking at cosmos and looking at like quasars and supernovas and galaxies colliding in with each other, we are just a microscopic little dot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about that all the time. Yeah.
I think that's where you were going with that, which I really like Richard Dawkins, because he puts things like that into a poetic type feel, and it's like, well, what we do is important to us. Like it's like the single-celled organism. A single-celled organism may not be able to contemplate or understand the vastness of space around it, that outside the material that it makes up. But there's a wider world that it comprises. It helps comprise a bigger biological machine, like a human being, a rabbit, or a tree.
Yeah.
Um, and then even outside of that, there's this cosmos. But what it does understand is that its function as a single-celled organism, its purpose, is very important, and it does what it does because it needs to. And I feel like that's where we find our importance as human beings, is kind of in that sort of sense, is that, yeah, in the grand scheme of the cosmos, we mean nothing, but in our little world, to us, what we do is important.
Yeah. There's I'd call it like there's a separation between the human world and the world. Like all the things that we do only matter in the little encasement of human society and civilization. Like
Well, if one day the human species is just not going to exist, because one day space will expand to a point where no life will be able to exist on any planet anywhere. All the
Mhm.
suns will burn out.
Yeah.
And so we're not leaving a legacy behind of any kind at that point, because one day it's just going to end.
Yep.
But the thing is that even though that may be true, what we do in is what you put the human world, it's still important to us, because as we pointed out, there may not be any life after death. And in fact, I lean towards that's probably the case, is that we just die as a cease of consciousness. So it's important that we do make life as luxurious as we possibly can, and as comfortable as we possibly can, while we have the time to experience it. And that's why it is important, is because, as Richard Dawkins would point out, is we live in a very remarkable time. We live in a time where we are capable of understanding what space is, what the cosmos is, and understanding, or being able to be cognitively aware of our own cognizance. That in itself is
Yeah.
basically, you've won the you've won the lottery on existence. Is we get to exist. That's the beautiful part, is we get to be aware of our own existence.
Yeah. Dawkins is cool. To put it simply.
Well, he believes in the poetic approach of getting people involved in sciences by making it poetry. And if you make something poetic, it becomes beautiful and it entices people into it. When he says things like, matter flows from place to place and momentarily comes together to be you. Some people find that thought disturbing. I find the reality thrilling.
Right.
So he puts it in a poetic form as like, well, I suppose if you do sit around and think that on a subatomic level, the protons, neutrons, electrons that comprise of all solid matter, that solid matter is, on a microscopic level, is predominantly empty space. And the things that the protons and neutrons, the bedrock of solid matter, is blinking in and out of existence, almost like it's not even there. I'm sure that would make a lot of people uncomfortable. But really, the reality is quite thrilling. It's quite interesting to think about that. The thing that does make it there is that it has real world effects, is that it creates a ripple effect. Like if there's a table in your imagination on the floor, people can walk right through it. It has no real world effect.
Yeah.
But if it is actually there, people will bump into it and they'll get hurt.
Right.
So it's an interesting concept. But yeah, I'm sure it makes the simple-minded very, very uncomfortable.
Right. I think he's poetic. He's also optimistic at the same time. That's another key, I think. Because if you approach these cosmic truths with impending doom in mind, then you're probably going to be kind of scared. Like, but if you accept the finite and transitory nature of existence, then it's easier to be more optimistic about things and just marvel at them instead of fearing them.
Well, Carl Sagan was very poetic about it too. Like he would say things like, as our ancient myth makers knew, we're children equally of the earth and the sky, and our tenure on this planet, we've accumulated dangerous evolutionary baggage. We've also acquired compassion for others and love for our children, and a great, soaring, passionate intelligence, the cleared tools of our continued survival.
What a quote. Holy shit.
But it's beautiful, though, and he's absolutely right about that.
Yeah.
He also said that we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. And that's exactly what we are, is the biological machines that we are. With the biological supercomputers that we have, we're able to gaze at the stars and understand. We are a way for the cosmos to look upon itself, really, and understand itself, which is really quite a cool thing.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to like Renaissance philosophies of like human beings were designed to look at God's creation and think about it. Like we are the beings that are capable of thinking about our own existence. And that's what sets us in the middle of the hierarchy of creation.
But really all we are is nothing more than simply a growth.
Right.
Nothing different than fungi or plant matter or algae. Algae is just like a very, very distant relative of ours.
True. Yeah. Puts things into perspective when you see like super lazy people. It's like, yeah, no, you're not far from the algae, are you? Like rolling around on your like Walmart scooter. It's like, yeah.
Well, and that's what makes me think things like communism and socialism aren't going to work. You're going to have a lot of people sitting at home playing with their genitals, eating chips, watching TV.
Whereas we would like to think like, no, people are going to do stuff because people like to do stuff, right? Like some people don't. Some people are slothful.
Well, but the thing is a lot of things that are very, very difficult, like farming. Farming is extremely intense labor. You're not going to get somebody to do farming unless it's a means of survival, because that's why our ancestors did it. Back when we look at tribalism and things like monarchical societies and stuff like that, is that we engaged in farming not because we wanted to, but because we had to survive. And I look at something like that, and it's like in a society such as today, like let's say that like I always forget her first name, but Cortez, she wanted everybody to work for the government for $15 an hour. You're not going to get somebody who's a farmer to farm for $15 an hour when they can go and pick up trash off the side of the road for $15 an hour. They're going to tell you to sit and spin.
Yeah.
And we have to face it. Farmers are very, very important to society, more so than we really think of, because they provide the majority of the food on our tables.
Yeah.
Whether it be soy, wheat grain, corn, you name it. There's fruits, vegetables of all kinds. You can thank farmers for that.
Yeah.
And the hard labor that they put into that.
People don't even consider that when they eat it, though. It's weird.
No, they don't.
That's one of those separation things that is talked about actually by a lot of leftist economic theories, is that like there's a separation between the work and the product.
Yeah, and that's something that I think people need to consider, is that a farmer is, you're going to want equal compensation for the work that you do.
Yeah.
Like I think I find it very, very bizarre, and I know a lot of right-wing people point this out, but I do agree with it. I find it very bizarre that the people who entertain us make more money than the people who save our lives.
And the people who teach us, or are supposed to teach us how to live our lives.
Well, I don't think they teach us how to live our lives, but I think they arm us with knowledge to help us live our lives.
Well, right. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, that's ideally, that's what the job of a teacher is supposed to be.
Right. And so you can do that with many different things. You know, you have math, sciences, and philosophy. I think philosophy is very important. I think that should almost be required curriculum at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I mean,
psychology as well.
Well, I see a lot of fallacious arguments that happen.
I think we should teach kids how to debate each other.
Well, I mean, we
should also like arm them with ideas to debate about. Like, actually, in my social study, in my history class, it's like I have the best teacher in the school is the history teacher. So like we get the philosophical component of things, and we get those things, and he actually lets us, like, he stages us with debates, and we'll do that like once a month, and it's really cool. Like, I actually have a really good history teacher, so it helps with that. But I think those things should almost be their own classes everywhere.
Well, like even the FDA did a logical fallacy when they attacked these. They said they basically said, think about the poor children. They said, oh, there's an epidemic of children vaping, and it's like,
right.
Well, you know,
the juuling.
Yeah, but it's like, you realize that teenagers go through a rebellious phase, and you're not going to stop it. You can increase the smoking age all you want. People under the legal age to start smoking are still going to find a way to get these products and use them regardless of what laws you create.
Yeah, it's the demand part. Yeah.
Yeah, so all you're doing is creating criminals.
Exactly.
And
you're just gonna smear later on, like, oh, you're a felon.
But if you actually look at the data, there isn't an epidemic of teens, of high school and middle school students using tobacco products. It's actually been in a constant decline since the 1970s, just spiraling down. Like back in the 90s, it was at 20%. You know what it stands as of like 2015? It's like 4%, 4.5%. That's a huge decrease.
Yeah.
And that's reported by the CDC. And so basically what that is, think of the poor children, that is a appeal to a motive force. That's a form of manipulation.
Yeah.
And that's why it is an illogical fallacy, is because it's a form of manipulation. Same with Riley Dennis's, like, if you wouldn't date this person, then you're a phobe. It's like, well, that's a manipulation. That's guilt trip. That's appeal to motive force. That's appeal to motive force. It's like, well, I don't want to be a xenophobe, so I'm going to do something that is against my nature because I don't want to be that.
Yeah, and the whole point of all this LGBT activism is supposed to be to let people do things that are of their nature. Like, it's so contradictory when you say things that way.
Yeah, and you don't want to do that because that shoots the movement in the foot.
Mm-hmm. And I think
And
it already has. Like, the
yes,
damage is done.
and that's my concern with it when I see it. It's like, no, you don't understand what, like, I don't know how old you are, but like, I mean, I was
I'm
around in the 90s.
17.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So like, I'm 35. I was around in the 90s. I went to counter protests of the Westboro Southern Baptist Church. I've seen Reverend Phelps in person. I
Damn.
was alive for that. And and it's like, I think the gay community needs to understand that we have it, that the gay community has it really well. Like, so what that like a company can deny making you a cake. I mean, I came from, I was alive when Matthew Shepard was murdered. And that was that was like the first time I think we've ever seen a group of people be held solely responsible for killing somebody just for the sake of them being a homosexual, because a lot of the times the police forces would look the other way, and they're not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are protected by law. We are protected that, no, you cannot hurt someone just because they're a homosexual. You can't do
Yeah.
that. So I think when I look at some of the LGBT community today, and they perpetuate this doom and gloom, like that there's these people out to get you, and it's like, it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. You have
Mm.
no idea.
You think that's why a lot of them are younger? Like, because they weren't around when it was worse?
Well, and I see it in the Black community as well, and I'm seeing it in the gay community, and I think that the progression goes the same, is that you hear the older generation talking about what they went through, and so the younger generation learns from that and thinks that it's still true today, and it's not.
Mm.
It's like, trust me, I was alive back in the 90s, and I
Yeah.
can tell you, um, it was much easier to be gay bashed in the 90s than it is today. You are much
Yeah.
safer today as a homosexual or a trans person than you were back in the 90s.
Even though, like, in some places, like where I live, the attitude still needs to shift. Like,
But they cannot take you out to the middle of nowhere, beat you to a bloody pulp, and leave you stranded on a barbed wire fence to die.
right. Which
That would
is
be,
a massive improvement. Like, yeah.
which is what happened to Matthew Shepard, if you're not familiar with his story.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, I've read it. But I feel like we could keep talking for hours, to be honest. Like, we might want to save it for another time, like, eventually here.
Yeah. So I'm glad that I got the opportunity to do this with you, and I hope that it gives you some peer into the way that I think and the way that I analyze things. It's just that I think sometimes I've seen people to, like, on the left hemisphere, think that I'm conservative, and
Yeah,
they get really angry when they see my content. But I think if they were to actually sit down and have a conversation like this with me, they'd find out, well, you're not really that bad after all. You are actually a leftist. It's just that you have a problem with the authoritarian pushes. And it's like,
mm,
exactly. That's the problem. I have a problem with being divisive. I don't like that it's males versus females. We should be working together. This isn't, we shouldn't be working against each other. That's divisive. That's going backwards. The whites and blacks shouldn't be at each other's throats. We should be working together. That's divisive stuff when
yeah,
we do that. When we talk about this white male privilege, you are otherizing at that point.
mm,
And it's like, no, we are equal. Like, I see, we need to see each other on an equal playing field. It's like, there, somebody who's black is not less than me, and they're not better than me. We are different individuals that are capable of doing individual things.
yeah. So would that be like your central message? Is like you're an anti-authoritarian leftist?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's awesome, actually, because like that's a voice that's necessary.
Yeah, and it seems to be a dying thing.
Mm. Yeah.
Believe it or not, that's probably roughly about the same thing that The Amazing Atheist is. The Amazing
Yeah.
Atheist, T.J. Kirk, and I listen to his content, and he constantly wants people to challenge his stance, and I would, but unfortunately, I agree with him a lot.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
Yeah. He's great as well. I like him a lot as well.
So I think what you see in The Amazing Atheist, myself, and Sargon of Akkad. Sargon of Akkad, I think, is a little bit more conservative than
Yeah,
me or the.
he's pivoting to the right as far as I can see.
Yeah, but I think that's the product of growing up in the 90s where we didn't have all this divisiveness. I mean, you did have the fight for gay rights, but the divisiveness wasn't there. It wasn't there. Like,
So
I
it's
mean,
a new monster that's appeared.
yeah, it's almost like nobody cared about your identity or anything. Nobody cared about that. And then suddenly enter 2016, suddenly it's relevant again. It's like,
Right.
what the fuck happened? We
Yeah.
were at a point in society where literally nobody gave a shit. Like you had black people making fun of white stereotypes, and you had white people making fun of black stereotypes. And everybody was cool about it. Everybody was friends. It's just like, hey, look at this stereotype, this gross overgeneralization, which we understand gross overgeneralizations are wrong. They're a fallacious argument, but we use them to make fun of each other, and it's all just good fun. And then suddenly it becomes like this ordeal where it's like, that's one thing that I have. Like, Halloween is coming up. I already had somebody bring to my attention that there were white kids wanting to dress up as the Black Panther, and you have the blacktivists coming out going, no, that's cultural appropriation. And I'm like, why is it so wrong that you have a white kid in their infancy? They're naive to the problems of the world, so they
Yeah.
don't see it as a racial thing. All they see is somebody that they idolize. That means that they don't see race. That's
And
progression.
that's the way it's supposed to be. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. But no, you've got to politicize it, and you've got to turn it into a racialized debate.
Mm.
That's painful to me. It's like that's moving backwards.
It is, as far as I can see, but it's backwards in a different direction.
Yeah. It's not a good thing. It's
Mm.
putting it's making an us versus them. It's otherizing, and I don't. It's like it's a good thing when a child idolizes somebody and they don't see them for the color of the skin, but they see them for the content of their character.
Exactly.
And
So
that
it shouldn't matter. And the cultural appropriation thing is that stuff doesn't really hold much water, really, because like it's why would you be conservative about culture and then call yourself a progressive? Like that doesn't make sense. Like what you should be is like pluralistic and be like, yeah, you can have that and I can have this. Like we should share our cultural like aspects with each
what's
other.
good for the goose is good for the gander. So like it doesn't matter if they're um, a Caucasian scientist, an Asian scientist, a black scientist. Scientific development that is needed to improve the way that we live our lives, because we can do science, and with science we can improve our lives. It's not just good for one culture, but it's good for everybody, all humanity across the globe,
Yeah.
regardless of who created it.
Humanity instead of race. The
Right.
human race instead of
Right.
the white or black race. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because genetically speaking, there is no such thing as race.
Exactly.
So it's like,
You want to
why?
talk about a social construct, like
Yeah, and so that's so if we look at science and genetically speaking, we're all 99.9% genetically like alike, that we have the lowest genetic diversity in the entire animal kingdom, which means that we're not even different breeds. Like different, we're all the same type of breed. We're just come in different varieties, like tabby cats. I've compared it to that before. We're all tabby cats. You got orange tabbies, you got tortoiseshell tabbies, you got long-haired tabbies, short-haired tabbies, got all kinds of tabbies. They're all tabbies. But
It's funny you
here's
say
the
that because one of Contra's characters is called Tabby.
oh yeah, she has the Antifa cat.
Yeah.
I made fun of Antifa as well. Violence for peace.
Mm. Although
That's
if I did want to turn into an extremist, like if I was forced to join a group, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going Antifa. Just because they line up with me politically, you know?
I think I would have when I was younger, but now
Mm.
that I'm older, no.
Gun to your head. You like this is just like a hypothetical situation. You had to join Antifa, um, the Richard Spencer wing of the alt-right, or some other extremist groups. UKIP in the UK, you got to move there and join that party with Sargon, or I don't know, like what's like a top left thing? Let's just go with those three: UKIP, alt-right, or Antifa.
If I was in my youth today, what would I probably lean to given like how I thought when I was young? I'd probably gravitate towards Antifa.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But not so much for the communist part, more so for the anarchist part. Because
Yeah.
when I was young, I wanted anarchy, but in my naivety, I believed that people could coexist harmoniously. And I thought if we had anarchy, people would coexist harmoniously more so than people thought.
Mm.
But as I've gotten older, I'm like, no, there really are people that you can't change. I mean, you watch The Walking Dead. I think that's literally what would happen is if you went into anarchy, is that tribalism would not be helped. I mean, tribalism would just happen because we are a social animal, and
Yeah.
you would see these little factions spring up is what you would end up seeing. And some of them would be more violent than others, and some of them would be quite peaceful and passive. And there you would have some in between is what would end up happening. And that's just human nature.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So I was like, no, we do need some kind of infrastructure to keep dictators like the Negans,
Right.
like, the saviors from The Walking Dead, people like that from overthrowing the little villages that are passive, and then the groups that form that are kind of they're more like a monarchical society, like the one that Rick runs, because they will wage war if somebody threatens them, but ultimately they are a passive kind of peaceful group of people that want to help.
Interesting
So,
little allegorical stuff going on there.
well, that's how they design their show is they design it based on difficult decision making.
Yeah, because you're in the apocalypse, so you got to make some hard choices.
Right. And so that's basically where you get put when you get put into the middle of anarchy.
Mm.
And if you think about it, like this country was founded basically by subpar anarchists.
Yeah, they were definitely like leaning towards that end of things for their time.
Yes, they were. And that's why, if I take a political compass test, like I said, like I will go off to the left and down just a little bit, not quite into the anarchy territory, but somewhat close to it.
Mm.
I do think that there should like I look at like what I did a video about this. Scott Wiener from California, he got rid of a law, and you would think as an anti-authoritarian leftist, I'd be in favor of that. But the law was the law that he got rid of was holding people accountable that deliberately infect people with HIV. He got rid of that.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
He decriminalized knowingly spreading HIV to other people. And I've been keeping an eye on their HIV stats, and they have been going up since they got rid of that. And that's what I was afraid of. I was like, no, that's imposing one's will on others against their own will. And that law was protecting innocent people from being a victim of that.
Yeah, laws can be used for protecting liberty, like
Right. Like,
actually.
well, rape, murder, molestation, these are all forms of someone imposing their will on others against their own will. And so when you create a law against those, you're basically defending the civilians, the people, against authoritarianism.
Yeah.
And so that's how I see it.
I think some people are blinded. Maybe this is more on the right libertarian side of things by just the government. Like the government is the only body of authority.
Well, if the government collapsed, you would probably put somebody else in that situation, in that place. But I'd say you always have to be careful that you don't end up with like a witch trial type situation where it becomes accusation over, the burden of proof. And so, yeah, that is difficult to do in our society. Like you brought up the Kavanaugh case, and it's like, it's difficult. It's hard to do. And I mean, if he is guilty of it, then yeah, I think he should be punished for it. He should absolutely have to answer to his crime, because that's not okay to do. But if he didn't do it, you don't want to see an innocent person persecuted for something they didn't do.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're not one of these ideologically possessed people who would probably love to see him in jail even if he was innocent.
But that's the thing, is I look at both the left and the right, and I'm like, as a skeptic, I have to say, I need evidence.
Yep.
I can't condemn or condone him because I just don't have enough evidence.
Yeah.
It just isn't there. It's basically his word versus her word, and I'm not going to take her word just because she's a female, and I'm not going to take his word just because he's a male.
Yeah, it becomes a weird gender war thing. It's odd.
And that's what I mean. So you look at fourth wave intersectional feminism, and that's what it's done. It says, well, you should take the female's word over the male's. Well, they're both capable of lying. They're both equally capable of it. And
Right.
if you
It's
want
like
example,
people make statements now and they don't understand what they're actually saying underneath it.
yeah.
Because I think if they did, they'd be like, wait a second, I don't agree with that. Like, but they're not thinking.
Well, I explained how that worked at one point. Is like basically in the way that it works is it's demonized male. You take a word that means something with a negative connotation behind it, like vile, or what is something that we don't like rude, and put the word man in front or behind it, and it becomes a new word. But it's the sole specific design of doing that is to demonize a particular group of people, which would be males at that point.
And it's like they used to understand that when it was targeted at them, and now they're just turning the guns around. It's weird.
Yeah, it's like that's not the right way to go about it. That's not egalitarian. That's not at all. And see, like I just look at a person as an individual, as people. It's like I don't care if you're male or female, or if you're trans, if you're homosexual. I don't care about what ethnicity you are. It's like I have to listen to the individuals themselves. And that's what I look at the Kavanaugh case. It's like he has his word, she has her word, but Kavanaugh is right-leaning. It's like I don't care what tribe he subscribes himself to. The thing is he's declaring himself innocent, and she's saying he's not. Well, she's a leftist. Well, I don't care about that either. That doesn't make it right or wrong. That doesn't make what she says right or wrong. That doesn't make it true.
Right.
That's just tribalism right there. It's like herd mentality. No, where's the evidence and it's like getting that evidence is going to be very, very difficult, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Seems
think,
to always be difficult.
well, and I think that that's why they encourage people that if something like that happens to you, you report it ASAP, as soon as you
Yeah.
possibly can, because that way there's more evidence that can be collected. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, you can give biological evidence. You can squirt that out of you, as gross as that may sound, but you got the DNA evidence right there inside your body at that point. If you go and report it right after the incident, and they can also treat you for they can treat you for STDs if you've been exposed to them as well, if you've been raped or something like that. And so it's very important that if something like that happens to you, you report it immediately.
Yeah. Indeed. Also, go to the police, don't go to the press. Like I don't understand that whole thing where people just they don't report it but they tell everybody anyway.
Yes, you go to the police and you go to the medical practitioners, and they
Yeah.
can get a lot of evidence, a lot of evidence. So that's
I
it's
mean
very important.
most of the time. Sometimes it's pretty barren of evidence, unfortunately.
Well, I had a friend that a female friend of mine. She got raped by her own husband. So a lot of people would say that's not possible, but yeah, it is possible. She got raped by her husband, and they found the evidence to convict him through seminal fluid on the mattress.
I guess that'll usually work.
So no, that worked.
But yeah. So do you want to like save things for another later date, or we could wrap things up now?
Yeah, sure. We will. Yeah, we should definitely do this again.
Yeah, I'd
This
like
was
to.
actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's productive conversation. But any closing thoughts? Anything else we could branch off through?
I can't think of anything at the moment.
All right. Well, nice talking to you, man. See you next time.
All right, good talking to you. Stay in touch.
I will.
All right. With that, I'm out.